right, guys, these are video notes for this circumference foldable. You should have a foldable and something to write with. We are going to go over the definition and formula. We'll go over how you find the circumference if you're given the radius and what the radius is. We'll go over finding the circumference given the diameter and what the diameter is, and then finding the radius or the diameter based on the circumference, okay? So guys, this is just an intro. We'll be going over a lot more of this in class. So if you don't fully understand right now, that's completely fine because we do have enough time to practice. After we finish writing today, you can go ahead and cut on these dotted lines. Then of course, I'm going to have you put it in your interactive notebook and add it to your divider, okay? So first things first, the circumference of a circle is the distance around the circle, okay? And the two formulas that we use for finding circumference, they're both located on your reference chart. So if you were to pull out your notebook right now and look at your 7th grade math reference chart, both of these would be on there. But we use pi, and we'll talk more about that in a second, times the diameter, or circumference equals 2 pi times the radius, okay? Now we can either use 3.14, which I want you to write a star next to that, or the ratio of 22/7 as approximations for pi, but we will be using 3.14. If you were to divide 22 by 7, you would get 3.14 something, 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 something. We use an approximation of 3.14 to represent pi, okay? For number 1, find the circumference of the circle below. Use 3.14 for pi, okay? So what I would like for you to do is, this is going to be called going from the center of the circle to the outside. This is a radius, okay? A radius is half of the diameter, but this is going to be your radius. So you'll go back and you'll look for the formula that has radius in it. So every single time I want you to write the formula, okay? So we have circumference equals 2 pi times the radius, okay? So let's talk about what we know. 2 pi times the radius of 9. Okay, so I have circumference equals 2 times 9 is 18 times pi, which is 3.14. And that's going to give me a circumference of 56 and 52/100 centimeters. Okay, when we have a decimal, we're only going to go to 2 places after the decimal. So if at some point we have to round, I'm only going to require you to have 2 places after that decimal. Okay, for number 2, find the circumference of the circle below. Use 22/7 for pi. Okay, on number 2, you'll notice that they're asking you to use 22/7 for pi. Guys, they'll always specify. I just think you're going to be used to seeing 3.14 a lot more often, but we can also use the ratio of 22/7. So this time they're asking us to use that, so we're going to go ahead and use it. Okay, so again, we're given the radius from the halfway or from the middle of the circle to the outside. Okay, so what we're going to do is circumference equals 2 pi times the radius, and then we're going to plug in what we know, 2 pi times the radius of 21. And then I'm going to multiply 2 and 21, which would give me 42. And this time they told me to use 22/7. So remember, we can multiply fractions straight across. So we have 42 times 22, and that's going to equal 924. And we're going to divide that by 7. So the circumference is equal to 132 feet, okay? If I wanted to work with a little bit smaller numbers, I could simplify, cross-simplify, and this 7 divided by 7 would be 1, and then 42 divided by 7 would be 6, and 6 times 22 would also give me 132. So if I wanted to work with smaller numbers, I could have done that from the beginning, okay? All right, number 3 and number 4 are asking us to solve for the circumference given the diameter. The diameter is going to go all the way across the middle of the circle from one point on the outside to another point on the outside, okay? So this time we'll be using the formula of circumference equals pi times the diameter. So we're going to go through and say what we know. So circumference equals pi times 22. And this time we're being asked to use 3.14. So 22 times 3.14. Or you could have said 3.14 times 22, either way. And that's going to give us a circumference of 69 8/100 miles for the circumference of that circle. Okay, so the distance around is 69 8/100 miles. Now, number 4, they're going to ask us to use 22/7. And again, our diameter is 14, the distance across that circle. So we have a circumference equals pi times diameter. I'm going to plug in what we know, pi times 14. And this time we're using 22/7 times 14. Remember, we put that fraction or that number over 1 and make it a fraction. Okay, I'm going to cross simplify this time to just make myself a little bit smaller numbers. So 7 and 14 are both divisible by 7. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. And 14 divided by 7 is 2. And 22 times 2 is 44. So our circumference is equal to 44 inches. And that's the distance around the outside of that circle. 44 inches. Okay. Now for the bottom portion, sometimes they'll give us the circumference and ask us to determine the radius. This one we know it's the radius because remember we're only going to the middle, to the outside. So what we're still going to do is use that formula, circumference equals 2 pi times the radius, okay? And we're going to plug in what we know. And it tells us that the circumference is 113 4/100, and that is equal to 2 times 3.14, and that's the radius. So what we're going to do first is solve this just like we would an equation. So we're going to multiply what we know, so 3.14 times 2, and that's going to give us 6.28. R is equal to 113 4/100. We'll divide both sides by 6.28. Okay, and our radius should be 18. So we have a radius that is equal to 18 kilometers. And I know it's kilometers because I went back and looked at that circumference. Okay, so this time we were solving for the radius. All right, let's look at number 6. Again, we are looking for the diameter. Okay, we're going to use 22/7 for pi. So circumference equals pi times the diameter. Okay, we know that 88 is our circumference, and we know that 22/7 is going to be pi, and we're going to multiply that by the diameter. Okay, so since we have a multiplication problem right now because 22/7 and the diameter are right next to each other, which means that we are implying that we are multiplying, okay? We are going to solve that with division. Now remember, when we divide a fraction by a fraction, we're actually multiplying by the reciprocal. So what we would think about is to do 7 over 22 on this side and 7 over 22 on this side. And remember, I can make any number a fraction as long as I put it over 1. So on this side, I'm just left with my diameter. And then I've got to do some work over here, okay? I can simplify here. Both of those numbers are divisible by 18. Or I'm sorry, not by 18, by 11. 22 divided by 11 is 2. 88 divided by 11 is 8. So 7 times 8 is 56 divided by 2. So our diameter is going to be 28 yards. Okay, so again, what I would like for you guys to do is to put this in your notebook. You can go ahead and cut on those dotted lines if you would like to. and you can put Circumference Foldable on your divider, and you will be ready for class when we start talking about circumference.